Portfolio Builder members, we nailed it with our trade alert again today. Sold the 295 covered call on the SPY ETF, and the market closed $1 higher than when we first wrote the covered call. That was out of the money. So currently we are generating a profit on the underlying asset, and I expect the covered call to also generate a profit. If you're a member of our Diamond Club, that trades on Tuesdays. We're currently long Apple. No action to take on that. We are at the maximum profit on that trade, and there is no action to take. And in our Whale Club, which trades on Thursdays, we're currently long Amazon and Google. Obviously, we've done very well on that trade this week, except that the change to expect come Thursday will be to start playing a long TLT position and to dump Google and go 100% into Amazon. I believe that Google will have some potential rough spots ahead due to their mingling with China and desire to take over that huge search market that has essentially been blocked from them. So I think they've been trying very desperately to make moves into China and appease the Communist Party, and that there's been actually engineers protesting this and writing about it. So I do expect some potential hiccups in Google's stock prices. Also, on the Amazon front, we can easily hedge against Amazon with Alibaba, the rip-off version of Amazon in China, who's now fleeing to Hong Kong because of fears they may get some serious sanctions against them, like America just did for Huawei. So to summarize the strategies, we're essentially long the SPY in our basic program and short the ETF FXI, which is a concentrated large cap Chinese ETF. I don't think a lot of Americans know what their money managers have been putting their money behind. And when this comes to light, I'm expecting some serious volatility on that FXI. In the Diamond Club, we're just trading Apple and hedging against risks on Apple. I wanted to go long GLD on Tuesday with call options and decided to wait on it to make sure the Fed would really signal that they're going to start lowering rates. They did it. All of our calls have been very spot on. So starting next week, expect us to start to reinvest part of the profit we generate each week against Apple to be invested in a longer duration, more aggressive GLD call option. So if you're not a member yet, consider upgrading so that you can get these trade alerts when they come out. So that's the summary of how we're playing the market. The basic program, again, trades Monday, Wednesday, Friday at noon Eastern. You buy 100 shares of the SPY or multiples of 100 shares. You sell the covered call for consistent income and downside protection. And then currently we're hedging against a more serious risk to the market, assuming that the big thing that could rip things apart would be a failed trade deal, which I'm almost certain will happen. So that's why we're protecting the downside on this portfolio with long put options on FXI. There's not a good proxy to do the same setup on the Diamond Club. Huawei would have been that play. Huawei just got wrecked. If we could have shorted Huawei, that would have been a great play to do that same concept. So we're currently just trading Apple with the GLD to the upside starting next week, a put option and a covered call. In the Whale Club, we'll be doing the Amazon trade with the covered call. And rather than buying a put option on Amazon, we're going to be looking at a put option on Alibaba. So we'll look at charts in a minute. And this one also is going to get some leverage on the call options that will be long the TLT. So it is looking like we're going into a trade war. The central banks are all gearing up by buying gold, lowering rates, printing money. And so that will be great also for our cryptocurrency portion of our portfolio, which we'll go take a look at right now. Again, our recommendation is to have around a 5% total allocation to Bitcoin. we're riding a little hot. This started off at 5%, but it's up 69%. I'm letting it run hot, a little higher than 5%, until I think there is some sort of at least truce or delay in escalations in the trade war. And so, unfortunately, I do not think that that will come from the G20 meeting. I know the markets want it to, and stocks are saying it might, but it seems that the stock market waits until the very last second when the bad news actually hits to really react. So we'll see how this all plays out. Currently, we're still long our cryptocurrency portfolio, which is 1/2 Bitcoin, a quarter Ethereum, and then 21% Litecoin, and 7.5% Bitcoin Cash. Now, really quick, if you are on a free trial, whether you're a basic paid member and you're experiencing our Diamond and Whale program, or you're just a completely free trial or expired member that took a free trial, our prices are rising. This Friday, the basic program goes up to $2,000 a year, but you can save $1,100 for the rest of your life if you join by Friday. So call Dean. This is only available over the phone, 505-322-7515. And if you are a basic member, we do have a lifetime deal to get you in for a one-time fee, and you'll never pay again. And it will include access to the basic program, Diamond program, and Whale program. All right, now we're going to take a look at some charts, and then I'm going to go backwards in time with all the news pieces I've collected. So here's a look at the SPY 5-year, trying to break into new highs. I doubt it will. I think that the only way it could would be some sort of delay in the trade war or trade war resolution. However, if you've been following my content, I'm highly skeptical that there will be any resolution to the trade war due to what Wilbur Ross describes as what they consider a good trade deal, which is a 2,500-page demand letter that essentially, when you get down to it, they want to Americanize the Chinese political system and legal system as well as economic system. And there's no way. The whole thing about the way the Chinese believe they have an advantage will be taken away from them. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But I don't think that they want to give up their advantage and all the pros of a communist socialist society. And so I'll talk a little bit more about what exactly those pros are and why it really can give America a run for the money. Here's the TLT. This represents bond rates, and the Treasury is going down. You can see this huge, right at 2 p.m., there was a big rush of people who wanted to buy the TLT and the SPY. It's like the knee-jerk reaction that the market has become conditioned upon when the Fed says they're going to lower rates. I think with a good scare from the tariff war, TLT can push to potentially 143. And if Stanley Druckenmiller is correct, saying that rates will go to 0, this could go closer to something like 220. So that would be an insane move up. We'll be playing this in our Thursday trade alerts for the Whale Club with long call options. So I do suspect this will be a nice long 1 to 2 year trend that we can play on the TLT as long as things continue to heat up and the central banks continue to have room to lower rates. So they've already priced in a 75 basis point drop, which would take us from 2.5 down to 1.75. So there's still a lot more the market could predict could still happen yet. So the bond market is forecasting almost 9 months into the future what they think the rates will do already. So very far out forecasts in the bond market. Of course, a trade deal being accomplished would create a panic, and everybody would sell their bonds knowing that the rates are no longer going to get pushed lower and lower and lower by the central banks, or even potentially fixed at a certain rate. FXI, a lot of, if you think about it, if you think of China as one giant customer that's making trillions of dollars in terms of GDP, tens of trillions now, the banks want their money. They want to manage the Chinese money. And so there is the biggest culprit. BlackRock is managing tons of money in both directions. They're pulling money out of America and pumping it into these Chinese companies, and in the same breath taking billions from the Chinese and pumping it into the rest of the markets. And so really the glue holding this trade war together, from what I can tell, is this relationship between the U.S. banking system and the Chinese Communist Party. So this is definitely very, very risky times, and helps you wonder why, if there's such this tremendous risk in the market, that it hasn't just unraveled right away. And that's because the big players, the banks that control all the capital flows, are in it with the Chinese. That's one of their biggest clients. So that's why this FXI ETF is probably, outside of KWEB, the most risky asset in the stock world for U.S. investors, because it wouldn't take much for the U.S. government to suddenly start sanctioning more and more of the companies, just like they did Huawei, and potentially even going to the extent of going after these ETF products that are collecting cash unknowingly from Americans and then pushing it into China, which we'll get into some of the reasons why that's bad. This is Baidu, the ripoff of Google in China, showing some major weakness. And so I was considering in our Thursday trade to do the same setup. We're doing tomorrow, the trade setup is to get rid of the Google position, which did well. It hit the maximum return. But we're going to consolidate to just Amazon and just Alibaba, which is the ripoff of the Amazon in China. And so I think that it will be in general a safer play as this trade war starts to escalate. Here's a look at Amazon. We've been long Amazon, but again, with limited upside. We were selling a protective covered call and then taking half that profit, buying a put option. And the end result is it's very hard to lose, but we max out our profit at a certain rate per week. So right now, market's obviously up, so we're capped out at the max profit on that trade. Here's that 5-year. Call option buyers believe that Apple could go into new highs, so a lot of people want to buy that and get rich quick. G20 deal, that sort of mentality. So it makes for a great opportunity for us to own the asset, sell an in-the-money covered call right now, and still walk away with a big profit week over week, even when the market goes up. So pretty phenomenal deal. Amazon is our choice for the whale club. We call it the whale club because you have to have at least 100 shares of Amazon, which means you have a pretty large portfolio to start with. And so that's the meaning on the name of the Thursday trade alert. We've separated it because most people don't have enough capital to own 100 shares of Amazon. LQD is one of the most important ETFs as a leading indicator for weakness in the U.S. stocks. And that's because it represents the investment grade corporate credit market. So it's rocketing to new highs. And so my assumption is that at some point, the malinvestment into a lot of these tech companies, because of low rates from the central bank, will become loud and clear. And at some point, these companies will be re-rated out of investment grade into the junk bond. And that's going to be quite likely the signal that all this corporate buybacks, perhaps not on the top companies that we're trading, but on the smaller, the mid cap, the breadth of the market starts to lose this free money, this easy credit that they can continue to use to buy back their own stocks. So this is one of the most important ETFs that we're following currently. Okay, let's take a look at the news I've collected over the past 24 hours. Mario Draghi signaling that they're going to lower rates, which was a big update yesterday for the market, and led many to believe that the U.S. Fed would do that, and they did signal that today. The big political news is, of course, the Hong Kong extradition bill. Most companies that want to do business in China set up a company in Hong Kong. So it's a huge city and financial center, greater than that of London or New York. And now China wants to be able to freeze people's bank accounts in Hong Kong, as well as extradite them without a trial in Hong Kong. And so now there's 2 million people protesting, and this is really the biggest news and what I would say signal for what's going to happen in the future. And I think that standing up to China is going to be the big theme of 2019 and 2020. Now, China really has their hands in everything. They give tons of money to universities. And if you think about it, who can really afford to go travel overseas and attend these expensive colleges? Well, of course, the elite, rich Communist Party's children are the ones that can be sent off. Now, I'm not trying to judge whether any individual Chinese student is good or bad. It's just alarming to see what they've accomplished over the past 30 years in terms of wrapping their money around everything. And this chart just shows how quickly the Chinese have been taking over the education market. They have more graduates of STEM than any other country by far right now. Their government is also subsidizing key markets like artificial intelligence, 5G, which is going to give them an unfair advantage at developing key technologies of the future compared to just a self-funded corporation in America. So we're starting to see some of the advantages that they are taking advantage of. And it also allows them to subsidize the prices of products they generate and put others out of business. And I was actually looking at the tax deal for companies trying to do business in China, and it's incredible. If you work in one of their 5 key segments, you can get your tax rate down to 10%. Their normal rate is 25%, but for certain high-tech projects that relate to the 5 areas that they're focusing on, they drop it all the way down to 10%. Now, if you're a Chinese worker, if you make over $1,000 a month, they tax 45% of your income. They're also having these people work 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. So tell me, how are American companies supposed to compete with that? China's taking half of their income, if they have any at all, and then they're collecting it together and putting it straight into these key markets of the future. There's no way we can compete with that. So Trump says we'll have a fair deal with China or no deal at all. Well, I can tell you what China thinks. They think no deal at all is better for them. And because they can essentially have this slave labor force, it's going to be extremely difficult to compete with them. So for their point of view, a breakup with America could be simply thought as a little step back for a huge leap forward. China Daily, parents in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region took the streets on Sunday to urge U.S. politicians to not interfere with the SARS extradition. So here's what's crazy is you have 1.3 billion people who cannot say certain words. It gets automatically filtered by the Communist Party's censorship team, which apparently has over 1 million people sitting there spying on its population, looking for anything negative that's being said about their government, and then quickly blocking that from even being able to be written about or researched online. And so, of course, they are framing the Hong Kong riots as something that the U.S. has organized. Because, of course, the CCP is so great. More signs that the decoupling is starting to begin. China has refused to process my application for a journalist visa. I believe this indicates a further attack on information as China reduces access for investigative journalists. So they're starting to close off from the world. Apple has asked major suppliers to assess the cost implications of moving up to 30% of their production capacity from China to Southeast Asia as it prepares for a restructuring of its supply chain. So the big bubble China has invested in, at least on a local basis, is their housing market. And so these Chinese folks, first of all, they're only making probably in a really good tier 1 job around $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Half that goes to the government. Then with what's left, these folks are saving a huge amount of the money they make. I think it's around 50%. They're using it to take out loans and reinvest it into housing. So these qualified males who do end up getting wives tend to own 3, 4, 5 houses. Now, they're not renting them out because the rent is too expensive for the amount of job labor. So they just have this huge, huge housing bubble. So I do believe that they are going to have some serious pain in the near future as America really has no choice but to start sanctioning all of these different unfair practices, companies, and putting a lot of pressure on China. So to see a headline like this further reinstates the reason why we want to own these put options on FXI. Now, timing can be very hard. You'll notice we're not putting big bets on it. We're taking free money from the option market out of the SPY, taking a part of that profit, and then buying the put option. We're not just jumping into it, assuming it'll happen right away. So this is an article. This is about their concentration camps. Very startling. I think this is something that will begin to become mainstream news. They actually started talking about it in the congressional hearing today with Lighthizer. And so what was interesting is both the Democratic aisle and the Republican aisle seem to be on the same, if there's nothing they can agree on, which seems to have been the way politics has been running stateside, this issue, they are on the same team for the most part. Almost everyone wants to apply pressure on China. And I even heard them talking about these concentration camps. This article is about them doing genetic testing to determine what ethnic background they have and to signal if they are part of a certain group that they've been rounding up and putting into these re-education camps. And so they actually let the media come in and look at some of these re-education camps. I have a few screenshots. Now, of course, there's government officials following them around everywhere. They looked at some satellite imagery where there had been towers and fences and things of that nature. They had taken it all down right before the news team came in and put a basketball hoop in. But yeah, I'll just flip through so you can get a feel for what it is. Our purpose is to get rid of their extremist thoughts. So these people have committed no crime to end up in these camps. And it turns out they'll be there. Some of them up around a year seems to be the typical time. Here's what it looks like when you're coming in. I had weak awareness of the law. I was influenced by extremism and terrorism. Here's a guy typing, I love the Communist Party of China. This is an overview of what some of these camps look like from satellite. They're huge campuses all over China. This lady had spent a year. This is one of those ministers. They have quite an interesting government communist setup. So they have what would appear like almost like an American sort of legal structure, kind of. But it has this Communist Party layered on top of it, where everything has to be approved by the Communist Party. Now, what's really interesting about the Communist Party is you only have one person in charge of you. So you may have a lot of peers in the Communist Party that have equal power, but you'll only have one direct power above you that you have to, that you really have to take orders from. Should we wait for them to commit the crime? Wow. The banks are starting to encourage and pump money through them. A lot of financial stress hitting China right now. The short-term lending rate is skyrocketing higher in June, showing the liquidity issues. So we are seeing some stresses starting to pop up in China, despite all the markets looking relatively loose right now and heading towards new highs in America, at least. Now we have this coming out. President Xi says he will support Kim Jong-un no matter what. The hot topic right now is, did the Fed lower or signal that they'll lower rates to attempt to manipulate the currency because the different currencies around the world are going down against the dollar? And I would argue that yes, that most likely is a key reason that they have to lower these rates. This is a commonality with the Chinese 5 topics. One of those is artificial intelligence and automated driving, and just a little article about Apple, Google, and Facebook looking at neuroscientists offering 7-figure salaried jobs to come in and work for them. Obviously, the meetup with Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un is to signal that, hey, we've got a wild card with North Korea, who likes to play with nuclear bombs. So that's adding some more pressure on the Trump side to be careful about how much pressure they do put on them going into this trade war, and also considering we have the election coming up next year. So here is the Chinese fellow. Of course, Twitter is illegal in China, so interesting that this guy has a Twitter handle with a huge amount of followers. Are China and the U.S. set to have new decisive negotiations? People around me and myself are less optimistic than we were when 2 leaders met last December. I tend to believe Trump's call is a result of fight of Chinese side. More battles may be needed for making the U.S. fairer. Lighthizer was on TV today with a public congressional hearing and discussed a lot about the trade war. My overall take was that he seemed somewhat skeptical that they will make a deal. So that was the general vibe, but they are talking. So market is rallying and has optimism. Here's a little clip of the cops beating up a protester in Hong Kong. So this continues to escalate. Everybody thought they were going to remove the extradition bill, but looks like there's a lot of pressure on Carrie Lam to continue it. So that's interesting. And of course, all the central bankers saying, we don't target the dollar, euro, or yen. Of course they do. And meanwhile, this is interesting to see a Seeking Alpha article starting to pick up on what I am forecasting. And that is all related to all this billions of dollars that's been collected by BlackRock and Vanguard and other big banks and put into these ETF products, which have all of the retirement money, pension funds, all that jazz, unknowingly flowing into this communist regime that's putting basically slave labor to work, not letting them have a voice, really everything that's the opposite of what America stands for. So that's why I think we're going to see some volatility. Good old 10 cent. My son and I both play 2 games. I play Clash Royale. He plays Fortnite. Both bought out by Tencent. This is the big software company that represents China and is huge. They have bought out everything they could get their hands on. So we'll see. Will I lose the ability to play my little video game here? That would be pretty wild. And then Mark Rubio, of course, is also on top of the ETF, the money flowing to the Chinese, and probably one of the first to kind of start ringing the bell on this, which could quickly escalate. Meanwhile, some signs that the trade is slowing down because of all these tensions. We saw a nice front running because everybody wanted to avoid the tariffs. Arguably, if Trump starts to signal that the rest of the goods are going to get a tariff raise, but there's a delay and a timeline on it, this trend could continue, which is what a lot of people are saying is drove such a high GDP in Q1, but now they're forecasting a low GDP for the rest of the year. So that's a wrap for today's update. No actions to take in any of our portfolios. We're sitting on near max profits in all of them. We can go up another $1 or $2 on the SPY before we get tapped out on today's trade alert. If you don't want to miss out on playing Apple and going long gold on Tuesdays, and you don't want to miss out on being long Amazon and playing the TLT push on Thursdays, upgrade right now. You'll get the whole program for 30 days free when you purchase your basic membership. Plus, you'll save $1,100 a year. So call Dean, 505-322-7515. Thanks again for your time. And if you are a Whale Club member or order this evening, we'll be reducing that Google out of the portfolio and really consolidating to the top of the top. Long Amazon, short Alibaba, and long the TLT. So hope you can join us, and that's a wrap. Thanks.